I think the idea of the recording is that we can show, people that we're actually doing something. And I don't think we're doing anything confidential. So just, for transparency's sake. So, hey, welcome to our it's already a second technical steering committee for Bitol. We have, I have a very, very short agenda. So I was hoping that maybe we could add, maybe we could start some of the discussion about the working group as part of the not the working group, the working guides, what Simone has was working on after we do that, if that's okay. Okay, so there was one other person I invited to join us, who was Georges Kopp, that showed some interest in participating in the TSC. He could not make it to the first meeting. It looks like he could not make it to this meeting as well, so I'm not sure he's going to join us. So I guess so that was the first topic. Otherwise, everybody was in the first meeting here, right? Yeah, so no new faces. Any updates? Todd, you may have an update for everybody. I don't know if you want to share it with everybody, but
Oh, I guess everybody, I'm leaving where I'm at right now, and I'm heading into a new startup with George as it is, working around the concepts of data contracts called Abia Data. So looking forward. I got about 2 weeks left to finish transitioning my current staff to deal without me, but very excited about everything we're doing here because it feeds right into that.
Congrats.
yeah, congrats, Todd.
Yeah.
Good decision. Anyone else updates? Andrew, the second edition of your book is coming, or
No, not yet.
usually when you write a book, you just it's just too much. It's just too much work anyway.
Yeah, I need a break.
Maybe I can have an update. I've met Andrew in Paris on the API.
Oh, cool.
It's very nice. So each of us give a talk on data contract. So
Awesome.
that and we had a little bit of a very small working group session together there.
Awesome. That's great. That's really great. What was the event?
API days, it's called. So
Okay.
because data contract and APIs, it's really a great fit, and a lot of people were very curious about that. I've met a lot of people from the Open API and async API world, and the community manager, the one behind building up the whole community behind async API, is willing to do a call with us. But perhaps we should prepare that with questions up front. But I would like to schedule that so we can learn from them.
That's a fantastic opportunity, I think. I was actually wondering, because we don't have that many things to talk about when we're doing our monthly talk. Okay, like I have 2 points on our agenda, so I was wondering if we could take maybe 30 minutes of one of our calls, and you invite him if that works with him, because I think this is already something that is scheduled in everybody's schedule. So I think it's easier than trying to find another spot.
Okay, I can try to do it maybe in January. That might be a little bit too quick with our questions. Let's see, because I want us to be prepared when we invite him to make this time.
That's why we have Germans on the groups. They are always prepared. Then you have the French people that, okay, well, the Germans are going to do the work anyway. So, right, Manuel? So, okay.
But you have to bring the champagne.
That's not the worst problem. Okay. I think we lost two of our Belgian friends actually. Dirk is the only one here.
Thomas as well.
Oh yeah, Tom is here. Yeah, but two out of our four. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my only other point was really about we released 2.2.1 yesterday. Okay. The process the process is not there. It's not there yet. Okay. When I suggested we should do the new version and things, we should probably rediscuss this thing at some point, because yeah, it was I felt like I was doing that a little bit on my own, and that not getting a lot of feedback, but maybe because it was a minor version, I don't know. But we did it. It's there. It's a minor update. It's a minor update, but I think the JSON thing you did, Peter, was great. Maybe at some point, if you have the time to, if you have the time to do an article about it or something, that would be great. I've also asked the Linux Foundation. I don't know if you guys have seen the website, the Bitol.io. It's a new website. It used to redirect to the GitHub, but we now have a real website, part of the Linux Foundation, for that. I've asked how we can actually access it and do things there. Okay, because Atanas, you asked me, we'll see. They told me, hey, your access is in the mail, it's coming. Okay, but it was not on my spam, so I've got to go back to them. Okay, but it should be there. So if anyone else is interested in writing stuff for the website, it's a WordPress, from what I've heard. Okay, so just ask me, and you can have access to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's it on my end. Very, very short agenda on my end. I don't know, Simon or Johan, if you're ready to talk about the guidelines, or maybe we can look through them again, or.
Sure. So I've compiled like the 4 most important controversial topics that arose during that discussion, and I think let's focus on them. I will share the link to the Google Docs, and you can simply have a look through the other things, and just post it here in the group again. But the topics that let me share the screen. I think that.
Yeah, I think it's
let's focus on them basically. Because that kind of, after reading, like, so first of all, I want to thank everybody for helping out. So we had a lot of discussions, a lot of questions asked, and it was like this team storming phase. Like everybody had their own perspective, and then now it's we have to condense it and find our path basically. And I think for that it was really great. And four parts really stick out. I would like to shortly go through it, and then we can have a discussion.
That works.
So the first one was, well, how to do extensions, how to extend it, because we will not have everything every vendor wants in there, and how to do it. Open API and async API have a mechanism for that. Do we already have one? I'm not sure. We have a little bit of like the customs field, but not sure about anything else. And also how to do that the end user wants to add additional information, maybe additional fields on a column. So how to do that. So extensions, how can we do that? The second part is server. So what about someone wants to connect to the data, where to find the actual data, the implementation of a data contract, so to say. When you think of a data contract as an interface, Where's the real thing? So in Open API, it's called service. That's why I put service there. But we can name it any way we want. It's just do we want to put it in the data contract? Is it out of scope? Where's the line for us? The third point is technology specifics. Is the data contract an interface with a type system that we define and then mapped to actual implementations? Like think of mapping to Google BigQuery, mapping to Avro schemas, mapping to a JSON schema, mapping to some Postgres SQL. I don't know how to do that. So we currently have the logical type and the physical type. But how do we see that? Is it an interface to multiple implementation relation, or is it one implementation has exactly one interface? Is it a one-to-one relation? These kinds of things. I think they're very important questions we have to answer. We don't have to answer it today. It just should this crystallize that there might be different points here. And the other thing is the target group. So who should use the contract in what way? Well, who should be able to read and write the YAML? Who should be read and write the contract via higher level tooling? And what tooling do we envision?
Okay.
Should a CTO be able to write that contract on a YAML in the editor or not? Or should the tooling be able to make him allow to create a data contract, but not the YAML itself, because we say this is more like a serialization format or not? And that's kind of this steers a lot where like all these questions, especially the second, third, and the fourth, they really steer the direction. That's kind of what I distilled from that.
So
okay, monologue is closed.
no. Yeah, it's not. Well, first, it's great that we have that. Okay, so thanks for putting all that together. Now, thing is, we only have 40 minutes. So, how do you want to discuss like 10 minutes on each, and we have something like a hard time stop, and then we can go to the next one. And if we do one faster, we have a little bit more time for the rest.
Do we want to, at the end of this, sort of see if we want to have working groups for each of the major areas and everybody can jump in on those? Because we're not going to solve these in 10 minutes. We just want to gather those on Slack.
That's also a good option. But yeah, so maybe we can just start the discussion around them, so a little bit, and then see who's working on what after.
Yeah, because we got the working group on the guiding values, and like, I guess these questions that came up as we're thinking about like what those values should be. But ideally, we'd have a value like when we have the guiding values or a vision or something like that. It would help us answer these questions. So like, we might decide to keep the core small and have loads of extensions and good extension support, and that becomes a value we have, and then that guides the rest of the decisions about maybe some of the servers and stuff like that. Just for example, and we've got a working group for values already. We'll hopefully come up. I guess, yeah, getting a feeling for what people think on some of these things, like how strongly people want one or the other, could help decide where we think our value should be.
Well, I mean, I can take a first stab at a thought here. I mean, since the current version of the contract already specifies a mapping for logical and physical types, I think doesn't that kind of bind us to the idea of to the reality of having to define what those physical types are? I feel like it's kind of one or the other. If we have a mapping of logical to physical types, there's sort of a consensus on what logical types are, but the physical types could vary, to Simon's point. So I think that kind of puts us in the driver's seat now when we have to say, well, what are those physical types mapped to, right? So I kind of see it as one or the other. Like I think we kind of have to. That's my thought.
But we can choose to make changes. When we think about version 3, we can choose to revisit some decisions that are already made. Now that obviously more of us who could input into decisions. So I think we're not necessarily bound by decisions that have been currently made as we start thinking about a version 3, which, and in my opinion, version 3 would want it to be. Version 4 shouldn't come very soon after, so we'd want to try and have a good decision made for version 3. Whereas I think what we've got now doesn't have to bind us to those, doesn't have to follow that closely to what we have now if we don't want it to.
Yeah, we could trim it, but I mean it's one way or the other. Is I guess what I'm saying. It's kind of like it's a fork that we've got to commit to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'd
Go for it.
sorry, Tom. I'd say let's design something that I wouldn't say we find ideal, but and then we see how it eventually retrofits to the existing version. Okay, so if we have something which is completely different, but we all love it and we think it's really great and super flexible and thing, but it breaks, then yeah, it's going to be version 3. But if it's, and then if we design something and say, oh, okay, we modify that slightly and we say just a little bit of an update, then we can have it in 2.3, for example. So I think let's maybe start thinking about how we picture it, because so for the system, for the mapping, we had a quick discussion. I don't Peter and I think Oliver participated as well, where we could use like the Swagger standard, we could use formats. Okay, so I don't know, it's very tactical, but the thing is, okay, I could use format to specify that this number is a UUID, or I could specify through format that this date is actually a US date or whatever. So I don't know if this is the level of specifics you want in the technology specifics there for the mapping, or you had something else in mind.
And I think that runs into a problem because we don't have HTTP as the glue underneath it. Not everything's turning into text, right? So you don't have the forced translation there. To me, it's a little bit. My biggest concern right here is actually sort of what don't we want to be out of this. And I think that this point was made sort of last steering committee is like, this can turn into a real mess. I think we want to make sure we don't create HL7. So where we have real conformance problems between the types. So I do think that this is going to be a difficult challenge for us to figure out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is HL7 known from our European friends? HL7 is an attempt by the healthcare industry here to create a standard to exchange document, but the drawback of it is that
all the implementers used different versions of their own internal implementations on types. So machine to machine interoperability is basically nil. You always have to have a glue layer. And I think that it's tough in the standard. You don't want to say, hey, you can't, we want to foster innovation, but we also don't want that. We don't want that problem where nobody's, nobody's contracts are interoperable.
Yeah, that was going to be I think my point is going to be similar. Like, I would make the case for physical types, as in, like, the goal is to specify an API. Like, if I, as a consumer, just get the contract, that should be enough, I think, to start using the data. What you need is like the protocol that you have to talk. You said HTTP. And then, like, for us, it's not HTTP, but it's the driver protocol between the database and and the consumer. And then once you have the driver protocol, your authentication towards your database, then you need to know the schema and the table, and you need the schema name, and then like the columns and all that, and the data types of the columns in the format of that database to know how you have to talk to it. So for me, if we want to be the language for specifying an API, and that should contain that direct information of how can I build a client without really knowing anything else. And I think the challenge would be if we go for logical types. So there's the case for logical types to have more variety, like one data contract can handle more variety, but then we have to also identify what are the varieties that we want to cover. And then we also have to do all the mappings between all the technical systems in order to get to the level of specifying an API that is concrete and that is interoperable. So I would be therefore in favor of focusing on the physical types first. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me. Is that Tom something you'd like to take the lead on?
It was just my position. Not sure if that's yeah, and I just also wanted to check what the rest of the group thinks in that respect, because it is indeed, I think, and that's very well done. It's one of the key decisions to make, like in what direction do we want to take this. So for me, it's like mostly important. Very good that this question was raised, and that we can see if everyone's aligned. I just want to give my starting point, but I would be definitely eager to hear other opinions as well, because it's
I kind of take the other position, because when you bind yourself to the protocol, basically, and you say we can only use this protocol, and we have if there's another protocol, we need another contract. I have no problem when thinking of async API, where you say, okay, these are the messages that we exchange, and then we have this binding, how they're actually exchanged. Thinking along these lines, and whether you define it in the contract or define it in a tooling that does that mapping. So so I'm more in the camp of a mapping. So you can have a contract, and well, the contract can be implemented on SQL. It can be implemented on files directly in the file system, and then used with or in Kafka with Afro schemas. And you can simply handle that via mappings, and it's the same contract. It's the same structure.
But that was the idea between the logical type and the physical type. Okay, to have this mapping at the column level. That's what we had in mind at that point. But from what I gather is that it's not enough. So is that the feeling that we want to have more details there?
So one thing I would have, there's no type system defined for the logical types. So anybody can use any types.
Correct.
This is currently, so there's no, when I use text and the other uses string, and yeah, so it's anybody can do anything.
Yeah, when we designed it, we were very selfish. We were just thinking about Java.
Yes, and when you have like one logical type and a physical type, so there's a one-to-one relationship. Okay, the physical type could be optional, then we would have that abstract thing, but in general it could be multiple implementations. So you can say this and that.
I think you end up with the spread of logical types that aren't implemented in a lot of systems. You know, I mean, you start thinking of like geo-shaped data and things where, you know, you're going to have different databases that aren't implementing it, but it's defined in a contract as a logical type. So you have a breaking problem. I mean, I think this might head a little bit towards the very first question on the list about extensions, but my thinking right now is that I think we should look at the two models, like the physical type with augmenting data on you know, metadata paired with it, as well as the idea of the logical type plus binding, and just like, let's maybe look at that. And I think that this gets to a point of like, how is this group going to solve contributions that are sort of, you know, big deals like this? And I think that that's a bigger question. And I'm going to try and shut up now because somebody else needs to talk.
But we can
Um,
talk about extensions a little bit. Yeah.
I was gonna make one more comment on the, if that's okay,
Sure.
on the type systems. There's like two angles here that I see that could be relevant. One is the way that I look at contracts is they extend the information schema of the databases. Where that stops, the contract goes on. And so if you look at information schemas, you also have duplication of your information schema. If you have multiple data sets very close to each other, like production and staging environments, those are very similar. But in the warehouse itself, you have like two representations, two separate instances of that. And I think, like, for me, where I see the real value of contracts is if we can get in a situation where this is actually being seen as a replacement or an extension of the information schema in the databases themselves. So,
Yeah, I
so
agree.
that for me is one aspect that I wanted to mention. And then the other aspect is that I think in both scenarios, you need some kind of mechanism, or you want some kind of mechanism. So Simon, I think what you're saying is that if we have a more abstract version, you can apply it to different very similar tables in real life. If you have one contract, you can say this is the same contract for staging as for production, or maybe even like in a Kafka stream, and then the same data is in the database, then you want the same contract for it, which then requires some mapping. But then on the other hand, if you are going towards like every table has its own contract, then there are very similar contracts, of course, very similar tables. Then you could also think in terms of reusing or mechanisms to kind of inherit and like more specialize the contracts, or define somewhere like a base contract that you can extend, or a set of columns or a set of data types that you declare, which makes it easy, or a column group that you can recycle in the different contexts. But that's more in the direction of there's a contract attached to every physical table, and that's kind of the foundation. And then there's like reuse on top of that as well. So I think those I saw as a trade-off, or two alternative approaches. One is a contract for every table, which requires also a form of reuse. And then there's like one contract that applies to multiple tables, which requires this type mapping or other types of mapping.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that kind of goes back a bit to like how we see the contracts being used, like who's writing them, what we're using them for. So in your example, like, well, for what we do, for example, is we define our contracts in code and we create different contracts for staging, for production, for BigQuery, for PubSub. They're all kind of derived from the same thing, but there's a bit of a mapping logic there. Because we don't expect people to write rows again, like write a staging, write production one, for example, or write one for pops up a big quick. We know that's going to be the same data. It's kind of like a pattern that we decided that we want is to have them in sync. So if we think the contract is more of a interchange format that more directly maps to something physical, or physical like a database, then, and less so for humans to write, then it probably makes more sense for us to be more specific about the types and say, this is for a BigQuery table and it has these types, this was Snowflake table has these types, Postgres, whatever. And like it will have those built in because humans aren't really interacting with those directly, but software is. There's a few hands up.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add, I think this discussion also goes a bit to target group decision.
Yeah.
Next point here is, especially if you look on how business people look at a data contract, they probably do not want to see a type like varchar 2 length 255 or something, or type timestamp tset with time zone attached or not. I think business people prefer something like this is a text, or this is a timestamp, or this is a number. And I think for business models, for logical data models, it would be easier to have only the logical types. And then there's a technical part for the server bindings versus business type is translated to something technology specific.
Martin, go ahead.
Jochen, essentially, I can pick up on what you have said. So I take the say somehow, I know the situation as leader, and I ask myself, so when it comes to the logical type, yeah, I would say it's important because the data contract describes what you should expect as a consumer. So then we are, in my opinion, it's the logical type here, for instance, string. In my opinion, when you are a consumer, this is not a sufficient information because you need to know usually the length. Yeah. But for instance, I have the data contract open here, but for instance, varchar 18, you may have a system where your data type is called not varchar, but in a different way. So I got the feeling one type of, one logical, the logical type should be a little bit more specific. So just put yourself in a consumer perspective. Yes, you see, I need to prepare my receiving system. I know it's a string. It can be 1,000,000 characters or just 10. I think the consumer should know this. And at the same time, the data contract is the standard the data producer commits to. Yeah, and this, by the way, this is a very common problem here for my ETL colleagues. Yeah, then in the source system, yeah, data type changed and the pipelines crash. Yeah, because they stick not to the standard they have agreed. Yeah, that's in practice a very big problem. Yeah, so, especially the thing with the data type. Yeah, or they put in characters where you expect a number and stuff like this. Yeah, this is when you get manual inputs in some data sources. Yeah, so therefore, in my opinion, it's super. And here, this is also my standard phrase: business must speak more IT and IT more business. Yeah. And I think when even if you have a super hardcore businessman there, yeah, you can explain him, look, it is important if you send a word or if you send an abstract, yeah. Take it for granted. If you don't believe me, just code by yourself, yeah. So therefore, I would not, when it comes to this kind of details, I would not compromise on the supposed needs of a hardcore businessman who is completely technical agnostic. Yeah. But at least here in Bitol, we have a lot of guys who have a quite good technical understanding, which are hanging around with the business. Yeah. This is, for instance, say my target group when I design the data contracts. Yeah. So it must be some kind of compromise between hardcore technical, for instance, here, I see here varchar 18, I would say, varchar, I'm working in R or Python, and where I fetch my data, I don't know what a varchar is. It's called string. Yeah, I don't care how it's called in Java. Yeah? Therefore, I would say it must be a little bit more technology agnostic. Yeah, but I think the consumer should understand which payload he or she can expect. That's important. Yeah, to prepare the receiving side. So just take the.
I'm completely with you, Martin. I think the idea of the physical was to be as precise and as close to the machine as possible. It doesn't always translate. Okay, so when you're thinking about it's not for me. I was taking some notes here, but and then we can vote or decide whatever we want. But the physical type would be the type in the source system. Okay, so if it's a varchar 2, it's a varchar 2.
Yeah, I know. But I ask myself, what I'm not interested in this. Also, usually, at least this is the design here we have in the Schwarzkopf. Yeah, you are not interested in what's in the source system. You put your data over an API, and then it's packed anyway. I'm not interested what's in how.
But there is a mapping between the two, right? So
yeah,
if the most specific one is the one you want in the contract, because the other can be derived. Like if you know it's a varchar and you know the driver, then you know in Python it's going to be this type, and you can derive in Java it's going to be this type.
Yeah, but Tom, that's the thing. That's the thing. Then you need to know. For instance, I do not speak Java at all. I don't. Okay, I know what varchar is. Yeah. But here we put yourself in a position of a consumer.
But also from the business, yeah, right. But also this is exactly the point, which is you need the most specific type in the contract as a starting point, because from that you can compute either the languages or the business level, because from a business level it's either text or it's a number. And for some use cases it might not matter if it's even a number is stored as text or as a numeric type. So in that sense, for a business user, so there's different type systems, more logical type systems that you can layer on top of another one. So for some use cases, it's like more logical from an interpretation, like is this a number or is this text? For an analytical purpose, this might be relevant. And then for other use cases, you might want to know Java type system or the Python type system. And so the point I'm trying to make is that whatever you choose, it needs to be the most specific one that you have from which you can derive the others.
That's true, but then you need a technology-specific mapping. And I agree with you. When you know that in Java it's called varchar, yeah. What do we know? What source system is used? Yeah, maybe it's Kotlin or whatever. What's the new fancy stuff there? Yeah. On my intuition right now, I haven't thought about this in detail, but my intuition right now is this added quite some level of complexity to the data contracts, because as you say, you need some kind of computation and you need to maintain a mapping. Yeah, and this depends on the possible source systems. I got the feeling that my intuition right now is that gets way too complicated. Yeah. Again, also I need to admit, I take the strong perspective of a consumer who just consumes an API and who does not care. Yeah, that's my perspective. And I say, just let me know what can I expect, a date, a timestamp. For numerical values, is this an integer or a decimal? Yeah. And if it's a decimal, I need the number of precision. Yeah, it's important to think about economics. Yeah, it's important if you got 2 digits after a comma or 10 digits. That's important. Yeah. And I don't care if it's in VBA, it's called single and double, for instance. Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, the thing is, what numerical precision can I expect? And then I need to prepare the receiving system to deal with it with an appropriate data type, with an appropriate physical data type. Yeah? But this is just my opinion at that point. Yeah, I would say let's try to keep the data contracts as technology agnostic as possible to make them reusable and keep them as simple as possible. This is my standard starting point. Yeah? And only let's add complexity if it really provides a big added value.
But so isn't the counterbalance to that is that would hinder the non-human consumption potential of these data contracts, right? Isn't that what we're? Isn't that kind of the opposite
Yeah,
point?
yeah, I need to say, essentially I'm arguing about the logical type.
But we would have to conform on primitives, right?
When a technical consumer of a data contract needs more precise information, and on my end, it's totally fine to have an additional field. But for a business consumer, I would say let's augment the logical type, yeah, for instance, string, and say me how many characters can I expect. Huh?
Totally fair. So why don't we take advantage? We already have a key called user consumption mode. Why don't we take advantage of that? Perhaps consider making it mandatory rather than optional. And depending on that user consumption mode, we can get as detailed as we need, whether it's analytical or operational or whatever other values we might consider giving it, right? So I mean, I guess essentially we're reducing the complexity in the logical sense, but I guess that would mean that we'd have two contracts or multiple contracts to represent a single transaction. I don't know if that's where we want to go either.
No.
I think you
try to avoid this if possible. Yeah.
I mean, if I understand what you're saying, I think you're actually talking about the difference between a very basic offering and somebody who's adhering more to best practices. I mean, I think we want to facilitate the very basics, sort of go into the open API spec. I mean, you can have just your attribute names in there, and they can be sort of useless. And that can be functional, but then I like the idea of using the consumption method to add the augmenting metadata, so that somebody who's actually putting in the effort and building out a very a more mature data contract can deal with the extensions of the consumption.
I need to say I didn't fully understand when you say we want to have a technical consumer of a data contract. What's also in this technical user needs a precise physical type. What I can't wrap my head around it at the moment. Maybe someone can elaborate on this. What does it help when I know that in the source system for instance, it's a varchar 18? It's just the example I have open here. What does a technical consumer of a data contract do with this kind of information? This is what I didn't fully understand.
It might be the representation of your interface. If you open a connection with a driver in any language, then the actual physical data type determines also on the other side how it's going to be represented. So you need to know in that protocol what the actual. So sometimes you have that the Python type might actually change, because sometimes it's a char, like a fixed array of 6 chars that might have a different representation in the Python data types than if you have a varchar. That might be just a string, or it might be another form or a stream or whatever.
So therefore the use case is, so I'm a receiving service. I have all the connection credentials. I get the contract. I read in this YAML file, and this technical service should be able to use all the information to connect towards, say, an API or DBC driver or whatever, and get all the detailed technical information out of this contract.
Yes, that's what I think is the goal. Because it's not only, so the difference is, I think the level that you were talking about is like human. It's like you expose an API, and does a human need to interpret the contract, or is a system? And so what I think is that it's human building systems, and they need to have enough information to build components that can talk to each other.
Yeah, that's true. I've essentially a human in mind. That's true. But I would argue like this now, when you go like this. So the data contract is, say, continuously interpreted. So what we essentially have more or less then in the data contract, there is already, say, some knows the original data source. So therefore, you already, it's documented in the data contract itself. Yeah? So, but you can also argue, you can put the effort there, or you can also put it, you can also implement it this kind of mapping. You can say, look, if it's a string, then I know it's a voucher. You can also
Yes.
this mapping.
Yeah, what you yes, exactly. What you
Yeah,
said
okay.
is like
Okay,
if
now
you
I
know
got
it's
it.
a
Now I got
string
it.
and if you know the length,
Yeah.
but you can build kind of an abstract data typing system.
Hmm.
But the thing is, and that's why I said earlier, it has to be the most precise one. So if your data, like abstract data type system is more precise, so you can like very sure like what is going to be the physical data type, if you can derive from it. And this is the thing. What I think is a very big challenge is to create that abstract data type, because then you're taking on the challenge of looking at all the data type systems of all the things we want to cover and build one from which you can derive everything. So that's why I'm more in favor of starting from the physical ones. Then it's easier to go the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, then I got it. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the discussion.
Yeah, great discussion. Really like it, and I think we'll at some point we'll have to come to a decision. Perhaps we prepare a decision record, architecture decision record with the two alternatives and the consequences, and it could be part of the guide values working group where we can prepare that. The decision will be here or async, but just to prepare it. Is that okay for you, Martin and Tom?
Sure.
So I would invite you to contribute there. I will prepare the template of some things out additionally, but I think a decision record makes sense here. I think we covered, and we can jump. Maybe we have 10 minutes left, so let's park this type system thing and maybe discuss one of the others. Perhaps extensions, maybe a less controversial topic.
Not sure.
Not sure.
So what? So okay. So when you're thinking about like additional quality checks, I figure that Tom is probably behind that. So does anyone have an example there?
I can add something from OpenAPI. So basically what they do, they say, yeah, you can extend basically everywhere. You just have to put an X minus in front, and then you can just add anything. That's their approach. It's a very simple one, and then they don't care, just extend it however you like it as a vendor or as a user.
As a key or as a
everywhere, like yeah, as a key, and then anything. That's the extension standard. It's old. It's just for OpenAPI 2, but in general, it's very simple approach.
I mean, SMTP uses that as well, so everybody's using that.
The thing is, do we want to go more, or do we want to have other perspective? That's yeah.
The only thing I'm thinking about extension is one thing is if we want to favor extensions, we need a way to avoid collision of extensions. Okay, it's not because I've got X dash something that it's going to be reference. Okay, so that's why I like the package naming convention in Java. Makes it easy to avoid collision. We killed Johan.
Yeah, maybe one more thing. I don't really see the X minus is necessary. If you look at HTTP headers, they also had the X minus, but they deprecated it. So with HTTP headers, you just can put any header you want for your own extensions. So I don't really think the X minus is needed. But I like the idea of having some vendor-specific prefixes. So like the package name or something. So if you really want to have a stable extension, define a way of your namespace as a prefix in front. I think that's really nice way to support it.
Maybe a domain name would just be sufficient. So the run is again for short domain names.
But I'm sorry, I don't have a data contract there in front of us. I don't know if you've got one, Johan, as you're sharing the screen, Simon, as you're sharing the screen, but do you see that? Do you see that as part of, because there was the block of custom properties, right? So the custom properties is basically a list of key value pairs. Do you see that as name of keys, or do you see that as just even a kind of a top level entry in a way?
So in the discussion we had, I think, Tom, you had mentioned something more on a column level regarding the data quality.
Mhm.
Did I
Yeah,
recall
so-
it correctly?
Yeah, so I'm on the fence here, or like I'm not sure what's best. So what I think is I don't have a good solution for when I look at a data contract and it's being used by multiple tools that get their configuration from it, then some properties will be common and some properties will be only for Soda. And then like to identify for a certain property, like it's usually as an engineer, if you go to that file, you probably, and you want to change something, you want to know like what's going to be the impact. I think that's one of the use cases that I have in my head. And then you're wondering like, if I change this for my tool, because I know my tool is using it, am I going to break any other tool that's or impacting any other usage from this? So knowing like what is, but we discussed this a bit, and I thought that the answer to my question there was pretty good or insightful. So I'm not 100% sure what is the best in terms of like you need extensions, and you need some properties have to be common, and some properties will be for one tool. And that, how do you create consistency so that it's easy for a reader to know like which tool is connected to which property? That actually I don't know yet.
Do you want to try to draft a few examples and we vote on that for next month?
The question to
Sorry.
me, I can, or was that to Simon?
No, it was to you. Sorry.
I can definitely draft up one or two examples, but I think like there's not. I'm not sure if I have like specific background, but I can give that a try.
I'm happy to contribute as well, or I'm pretty sure Simon
Yes.
as well. So, hey, Peter.
Yeah, I think on just Tom's point about the clashing of tools on certain attributes. So I think we mentioned in the chat before JGP about how custom properties would exist where if multiple people start adding in the same custom property, then that would look to be something added into the specification itself to then avoid this kind of conflicting tool kind of perspective. So it's quite hard to judge from an outset like right now if we don't have anyone consuming from it. But it would be something that would come up later on as people build tools around it.
Yeah, I think one thing specifically when I'm thinking about this use case, okay, is that I also don't want to be a blocker in a way, like, hey, Tom needs a special key for something for the data contract for Soda. That okay, that's a rule. Just do it. Okay, same thing for you, Peter. Okay, so, and I think if you're working on data generation, you will probably have a lot more business rules that we have now. So I just don't want us to sound like we're slowing you guys down, and then maybe we review some keys over time and say, okay, well, this seems to be pretty common. And maybe having a because I want it to be extensible. So, and maybe the custom properties are not enough, right? So so that's where I think. So maybe Peter, you can also work with Tom. Maybe we can just create an extension working group or something, and then we can come with examples. I think if we show example, at least for me, if we show examples, that's going to be a lot more, having a small use case and an example of how we could do it. I think that would be for me a lot more. I'm a visual guy, even if it's text or code. So
I
Just
can
wanted to
definitely write
share.
up an example, and like giving a trade-off. I don't have in my head like this is the right way yet for extensions, but I can definitely share some examples that help the discussion, I think.
Maybe some sharing from people from OpenAPI. Basically, they have this very free extension mechanism, and they don't want to enforce anything on the vendors, but still best practices. That's kind of what they missed. So and that's what we're learning from there. Just to say some recommendations.
Yep.
So it's not enforced, but maybe use some short prefix for your vendor specific things. With an example to do that, and you can still do anything you want. So no restriction here. And I think that might be a way for us as well.
I'm curious how they avoid the collisions scenario that JGP mentioned earlier. I mean, maybe that's another thing we could take away from OpenAI, OpenAPI.
The great thing is OpenAPI initiative is the same abbreviation as OAI. It's totally confusing.
I'm so used to saying OpenAI. Rolled off the tongue.
Yeah, I can't really remember something in that regard, to be honest, from what so perhaps they can share that. I think every vendor uses their own prefix, like AWS. And I don't know, there's no other rule. So I think they probably just either the collisions are theoretical and have never occurred. That's what I assume, but I can't prove it. And
it might be also we've got to look if you've got any examples, it could be helpful as well. Okay, so we're really at time. We're already 1 minute late, and a lot of people have chaining things. So guys, thank you so much for joining. I think it was okay. We're slowly getting there, right? Now. Well, I don't know if all of you celebrate or none of you celebrate, but Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah is a little late now, but have a wonderful end of the year. Get some rest. 2023 was difficult. 2024 is going to be even more difficult. Okay, so I'm not wishing anything good. It's going to be terrible. Okay, guys.
You should go talk to Santa.
All right, let's not bring Santa anymore because I've got an argument with Mr. Jones here. Okay, guys, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye-bye.